Hi, my friends. I want to tell you another story about Kyrgyzstan and the lost tribes of Israel and why this depicts God's heart, why this theme is so important in Scripture. Interestingly enough, it's a theme that many Christians don't see. Jews do talk about it. The rabbis talk about it. Islam, because Islam is mostly banned or just push the former revelations of God to the side. Islam doesn't read this. Some of the other more ancient traditions, maybe Shintoism and Tengadism, they no longer view or remember this book, even though they have customs of a lost book. And even in Shintoism, there's a book in the mouth of a fox, and the book is called the Torah, the scroll of the Torah, which is fascinating. But back to the Kyrgyz, I was in the Kyrgyz mountains and went to a village, and as I approached the village, there were some boys, teenagers out in front of the village, and I said to them, could you take me to the wisest man in this village, the man who knows your culture and customs and history better than anyone else? And they started to take me to the Islamic mullah. But before getting to the mullah, they said, there's a man who knows our culture and customs and faith and history better than the mullah. And so we turned and went to this old man's house. We sat down as Kyrgyz custom and had tea and drank and started talking about the Kyrgyz culture. I shared a little bit about who I am, learned about more about him. And we talked about the Kyrgyz God guest tradition, where Kyrgyz believe God will come walking into their camp, or their community or their village, and they need to welcome him obviously as the Lord God, honor him, treat him well. So we talked about that, all the customs that Kyrgyz do if God were to walk into their camp. And again, this is a tradition, a belief, a faith that Westerners don't have a grid for. We don't have the mental grid to believe that God might come walking into our community. But in Kyrgyz culture, it's part of their tradition. And so after talking about that, I pulled the Bible, the good book, the script, the Lo Kitab, the Bichik, the writings of the prophets, whatever it is that you call it in your culture. I pulled it out and I showed it to the man. And I said, can I show you a passage? Would you like to read a passage from this book that talks about the God guest traditions that we just talked about? And he said, no, I won't touch that book because I don't want to pollute my ancestors or curse my descendants. They've been told that this is a foreign book, a bad book, a cursed book. Even though it's got all of Kyrgyz culture in it. It's absolutely amazing. And the Kyrgyz have the story of a book having been burned, their ancient book having been burned and lost. And when it was burned, the enemies of the Kyrgyz said, may darkness come upon you and may you never see light again. And that was the curse spoken over the Kyrgyz when the ancient book of the Kyrgyz was burned. And again, I believe it was the good book. So I started to read, and my Kyrgyz is not bad. I'm dyslexic, so I'm not a great reader. But I started reading from Genesis chapter 18, and let me pull it up real quickly. I'll read what I was reading to this man. It says, okay, the Lord appeared again to Abraham near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. One day, Abraham was sitting at the entrance to the tent during the hottest part of the day. He looked up and noticed 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he ran to meet them and welcomed them, bowing low to the ground. My Lord, he said, if it pleases you, stop here for a while. Don't pass me by, right? Rest in the shade of the tree while water is brought to wash your feet. And Kyrgyz don't wash the feet, but they'll wash the hands before a meal. And since you've honored your servant with this visit, let me prepare some food to refresh you before continuing on your journey. All right, they said, do as you have said. So Abraham ran back to the tent and said to Sarah, his wife, hurry, get 3 large measures of your best flour, knead it into dough, and bake some bread. Then Abraham ran out to the herd and chose a tender calf, the fatted calf, which Kyrgyz often have, tied up, and gave it to the servant, who quickly prepared it. When the food was ready, Abraham took some yogurt and milk and roasted meat and served the men. As they ate, Abraham waited on them in the shade of the trees. And this is so interesting because the Kyrgyz will do this. I often would go into a Kyrgyz home and they were, excited, very welcoming and warm. And then they'd disappear for like 2 hours and I'd be sitting by myself, just waiting. And then this feast would come out of meats and breads and everything. And then oftentimes when I ate, not always, but oftentimes when I ate, the Kyrgyz wouldn't eat with me. They'd stand by just like Abraham is here. So everything is similar, again, except for the washing of the feet as opposed to the washing of the hands. Okay, then the visitor says, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" "She's inside the tent," Abraham replied. Then one of them said, "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." And again, so there's the blessing. Abraham welcomed God to his tent, God and the two angels, and he got the blessing. And again, Kyrgyz belief knows that there's a blessing attached to welcoming and honoring God. Sarah was listening to the conversation from the tent, which again, this is so funny because Kyrgyz women will often be not present in the room, but they'll often be listening to what's happening, the conversations taking place inside the room. Sarah was listening to the conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old, and by this time, and Sarah, sorry, the wind's kind of blowing the page a little bit. You see, I'm a bad reader. Actually, by this time, when I was reading the book, this story to the old man in the high mountain village, he actually took the book from me because he couldn't believe that I was reading his culture and his traditions from, in a sense, the cursed foreign book. He had to see with his own eyes, and even though he had just said that he wouldn't touch it for fear of polluting his ancestral line and cursing his descendants, he grabbed it from me and read it for himself. So it says, they were past the age of having children, so Sarah laughed silently to herself and said, "How could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is so old?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, 'Can an old woman like me have a baby?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh." But the Lord said, "No, you did laugh." And the name of their child was Isaac, which actually means laughter. So then the passage talks about the Lord going to Sodom and Gomorrah, the Lord and the two angels, and Abraham having a conversation with them. And at this point, I wanted to show him another passage from Genesis 32. So I had to take the book out of the man's hands, this old man's hands, and find this other passage. And again, I started reading Genesis 32, and I'll go on to share that with you. But he absolutely loved the book. After reading Genesis 32, he asked me for the book. Again, he couldn't believe that he was reading his culture, his faith, his traditions from the quote unquote foreign book. And again, it's not a foreign book to the Kyrgyz. It's actually not foreign to any indigenous people that actually believe in their own traditions and cultures, because all nations have been seeded with the lost tribes of Israel with Israel. This was 2,800 years ago, 2,700 years ago. And these seeds took root and became part of the nations. And so you could, if you package this message in Christianity or Judaism or some other foreign faith, then it will appear foreign to them. But if you just give the book to anyone, Japanese, in India, Native Americans, whoever it is, you give them the book, let them read it in their own language, they'll see the similarities. They'll totally see it, as long as it's not packaged in a foreign religion. So this old man was seeing it, loved it. He actually asked me if he could have it at the end after, again, this was 40 minutes after, by this time it was 40 minutes after saying he wouldn't touch it. And I said no, because I had all these notes and things that I'd written. And I said no, but I gave it to him later. I sent him a copy, a new version of it, sent it to him. And then I met him a couple of years later, and he came up to me and whispered to me and said, "This is the best book in the world, and it is our ancient book." And he and I might not have shared the same culture or same religion, but we shared the same faith. We had this love for God that just grew and grew as we read the text, the script, the narrative, the God narrative, whatever you want to call the book. Again, it doesn't really matter. It's the text itself. And that's what I believe is the purpose of this whole theme of the lost tribes of Israel. It's not about religion. It's just about coming back to the God of our forefathers. And so that's what I see happening with Kyrgyz when they read the book. They're often will have an experience with their ancient God. They'll recognize their culture and their customs in it and come back to their God. That's what happened to this old man. And that's why God put this in this text. He's an awesome author. He's the storyteller. And we're living out his story. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. Many blessings to you. God bless you all. Bye.